Never before has a role defined an actor's career that's lived from generation to generation, like the role as the monster in Universal's 1931 classic horror film, Frankenstein. My guest this afternoon is the daughter of the iconic actor Boris Karloff, SARA Karloff, whose dad played the monster role that continues to be as popular today as it was back then. What a thrill it is for me personally, because I'm a big fan of horror films and, all the Universal monster characters. SARA Karloff. SARA, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And how are things in Lake Tahoe?
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you.
I want to start off early in your dad's career. He came from England, and ironically enough, he did not come right to Hollywood.
No, he didn't. He left England and took a ship. First of all, he flipped a coin between Australia and Canada.
Oh, wow.
And Canada, British Columbia won, and he spent 10 years in British Columbia before coming to Hollywood.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know he flipped a coin. Oh, my goodness. Things could
Yes,
have
he
been
did.
Things could have been much different.
Much different indeed. Showed you how much he knew about the movie business.
He could have been acting with kangaroos on stage.
Certainly.
So your dad's first acting job in Canada, he did a lot of odd jobs before he got on stage.
Yes, he did. His first job was with a farmer. He thought he had a job lined up with a farmer. The farmer never heard of him. But the farmer was kind enough to give him a job.
So he was a great actor. He was a great actor right off the bat.
But his first job was on a farm. He slept in the barn and did whatever odd jobs the farmer could find for him to do. And eventually, he heard of an audition being held with a repertory theater group, and he auditioned for it, saying that he'd had a lot of experience, that he'd been in many plays in London, which in fact he'd only seen. He'd not been in.
Right.
And the manager kept a straight face and gave him a job. And at the beginning of his first performance, his salary was $30 a week when the curtain went up on his first performance. But when the curtain came down on his first performance, his salary was then $15 a week, because it was abundantly clear he'd never stepped foot on a stage before.
And he never had any training as well. Nothing. No,
it was clear that he'd never had any training, except he'd been, I think, in the 7th grade. He'd been in a school play in which he'd played the devil.
His brothers were they diplomats?
Yes, they were diplomats. My father's formal education was for the consular service. And he didn't want any part of it, but he did finish his formal education. And when he finished school, he boarded a ship and went to British Columbia, and the rest is history.
Did he ever tell your daddy? Did he ever tell you the reaction from his family when he said he wanted to move to Canada?
Oh, they were not pleased at all. He was the black sheep of the family.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, one of his brothers served in China and in India, and one of his brothers was knighted for his service in China.
Oh, wow.
So, indeed, he was the black sheep of the family.
Wow.
His father also was in the diplomatic service.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, because, if you grew up in a family of attorneys, you're probably going to be an attorney.
Right. And most of his brothers were in the consular service. He was the youngest of 9 children, 7 brothers, and 1 sister. And he was the youngest by 7 years.
Mm. Your dad goes to Canada and he's doing physical labor. And when you're doing physical labor and you're starving, it really does a lot for your character and your passions,
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm.
I think that your dad brought that to the gentleman, and he said, "Listen, you got to put me in this," and the rest, like you say, is history. When did your dad go from William Henry Platt to Boris Karloff?
He went from William Henry Pratt to Boris Karloff sometime while he was still in British Columbia. Somewhere about 1919, 1917, somewhere around in there.
First of all, where did the name even Boris, Karloff, where did that come from?
Well, when he was asked that question, he always said that Karloff came somewhere way back on his mother's side of the family, and Boris came from thin air. All the biographers who have done research on his family history and never found a Karloff in his mother's side of the family.
Wow.
So I don't really know, but that's what he always said when he was interviewed and asked that question. So I'm sticking with his story.
Did he ever legally change his name?
No.
Oh my goodness.
No, he signed papers, legal papers, William Henry Pratt, a.k.a. Boris Karloff.
Oh, wow. Interesting. My kind of guy. I like your dad. I like his style. I like his style.
Yeah.
Obviously your dad was very famous for playing the monster in Universal's 1931 Frankenstein. Showbiz in Hollywood, a lot of it, the people that I've had on, and they've had these big roles that define their careers. A lot of it was just pure luck and being at the right place at the right time.
And it was so with my father.
Right. How did your dad get the role?
Frankenstein was his 81st film, and he said hardly anyone saw the first 80.
Oh, my goodness. And how did he get the role? How did he end up getting cast?
Well, he'd made, 80 films before that, and then one of the last ones before Frankenstein was a film called The Criminal Code. He'd been in the play, directed by Howard Hawks, and then he was asked to play the same part in the film, again directed by Howard Hawks, and he was in the studio commissary, I believe, when because he was working at Universal, and James Whale was just taken over the role of the director of Frankenstein, and he spotted my father and asked him to come over and join him at his table for a cup of coffee. And he said that my father had an interesting face. And my father was not quite sure how to take that. And then when he proceeded to say he'd like him to test for the role of the monster in Frankenstein, my father again was not quite sure how to take that because he was wearing his best suit and he thought he looked pretty spiffy. But he was a starving actor, and he was delighted to be up for testing for any film. So he and Jack Pierce sequestered themselves in Jack's makeup room for about 2 weeks and worked on the makeup.
Wow.
And Jack, of course, was the head of the makeup department at that time at Universal and was an absolute genius at makeup. And what he came up with, of course, became cinema history. Amazing.
And like I said earlier, a lot of planets got to line up for. So Lon Chaney Sr. passes away because he was supposed to get the role as the monster.
He would have quite naturally. Chaney Sr. would have been offered the role, and then Bela Lugosi was offered the role and turned it down because it was a non-speaking role. And then my father was in the right place at the right time and was offered the role. And thanks to Jack's wonderful makeup and my father's testing of it for the role, and James Whale's wonderful direction, and it just was a marriage of wonderful talents all put together for that film. The script and the direction and the makeup and my father's interpretation of the role and portrayal, it turned out to be iconic.
Yeah, iconic. I mean, it was on a couple months ago. I was watching it, and it's just fantastic. Everything comes into place when you're watching that film. The black and white, the scenery, the cinematography, amazing job. I want to ask you, because you said that was your dad's 81st film, and even up until that point, he was still an unknown actor. And the credits read for the monster. Do you remember?
Absolutely. And the beginning credits only said the monster and with question marks. And then the end rolling credits did give his name. But he wasn't even invited to the premiere.
Wow.
And he didn't see the finished film for several months after it premiered.
Your dad, I mean, obviously was a big, huge horror star. He didn't like the word horror. He liked terror instead. Is that true?
That's correct.
Why? Did he ever give you an explanation?
Certainly. In many interviews, he gave the explanation. He felt that horror denoted revulsion and terror denoted fright and making the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But he felt that horror really denoted revulsion and blood and gore dumped in your lap, and that terror left a lot more up to the imagination of the audience and participation of the audience's imagination and their intelligence, and that just simply blood and gore insulted the intelligence of the audience.
And, you know, your dad was obviously played the monster, and it really typecast him and made him iconic overnight. A lot of actors, when they get typecast, you know, they don't get any jobs anymore, and they may whine a little bit when you see them in an interview and say, well, I can't get anything because I played this character for a long time, and everybody sees me as that character. But your dad embraced the typecast.
Well, my dad only played Frankenstein 3 times, and that was his decision. He felt that the script and the characterization had gone as far as it could without really insulting and degrading the scripts and degrading the storyline and degrading the character. So he decided he would not play that role anymore. And he didn't, but he did. He often said, when asked if he minded being typecast, he said, heavens no. It kept him a working actor for the rest of his life. And it also, he said, isn't it everybody's wish, everybody's dream that no matter what their job is, that they have a niche that they fill and fill it successfully, and that their name comes up when a certain job is open, no matter what the job is, no matter, if you're a plumber, you want to be the best plumber in the world, and if you're an actor of a certain type, if you're young, you get young roles, and if you're a song and dance man, don't you want to be the best? Don't you want to be typecast as a song and dance man? So he did not mind being typecast, and then, of course, later he had the opportunity to star on television in many, many types of roles. Yes. And then, of course, he did many children's albums. He did some comedy roles in Comedy of Terrors and in the remake of The Raven. He guest starred on all the prominent shows of the day on television. Did a huge body of radio work. He starred in 5 Broadway plays. Of course, Arsenic and Old Lace and Peter Pan, where he played Captain Hook as well as Mr. Darling. And he starred opposite Julie Harris in The Lark, for which he was nominated for a Tony. And then, of course, he won a Grammy for How the Grinch Stole Christmas, narrating it and being the voice of the Grinch. So he had a very broad-based career. And
that was one of the joys of his highlights of his career, was narrating and playing that role as the Grinch and voicing the role as the Grinch.
Oh, indeed it was. Indeed it was. I mean, it's played annually. Yes. At Christmas, as the Frankenstein is played annually at Halloween. So he owns a bit of 2 holidays.
Yes, it's true. And when the Grinch is always on, I have my kids watch it with me because it brings me a lot of memories as well when I was a kid. So, you pass that on to generation, from your
absolutely.
And it
too is multi-generational in its appeal, as is Frankenstein.
Right. 1931, that's almost 100 years ago. I mean, it's still iconic.
I know.
It's amazing.
I know, and so is the Grinch multi-generational in its appeal.
And I know you go to. I don't know what comic tours you go to, but I know that you meet a lot of your dad's fans, and it must be amazing. I mean, he would be overwhelmed with joy to see that.
Oh, he would be absolutely astounded at his fan base. I mean, he was a very, very modest, self-effacing man with a lovely sense of humor, and his humor was very often turned back on himself, and he would be just astounded at the enormity of his legacy and his fan base.
Sarah, I want to circle back to the Grinch for a second. You said your dad won a Grammy for that. Do you remember what he did with the Grammy?
Yes. He was not into awards of any sort, and his when the Grammys were on that year, he was in England, and his agent Arthur Kennard called him and said, "Boris, you've won a Grammy," and he said, "Well, you get it, you pick it up for me." So the next time my father was in Hollywood for work, he went to his agent's office, naturally, and Arthur said, "Here, Boris, here's your Grammy." And my father picked it up and turned it around, looked at it, and he said, "It looks like a bloody doorstop." And he walked over and put it on the floor in front of his agent's door, and he left it there.
Oh my goodness, that's classic! What a classic thing to do. He's not really into that. You keep it.
So ultimately, right. I have it.
Oh, you have it. Oh, excellent.
But he did leave it in his agent's office.
Oh wow. We talked about Jack Pierce, the iconic. He was another legendary. No other individual is more significant in the 20th century makeup artistry than Jack Pierce.
That's right. And my father referred to him as an absolute genius, the best in the business.
Now he was, in a lot of ways, he was like your dad. I mean, when he came from Greece, I believe, and your dad went to Canada, and they both struggled. And then he was an actor as well, I believe. And then he fell into makeup artist stuff, and the rest was history.
I think he also was a baseball player.
Oh, yes, he was a baseball player as well. He came to California trying to become a baseball player. And he fell into silent films, and then, I don't know, the rest was history, I guess. But, yeah. I know you get the question asked all the time. How many hours did your dad sit in the makeup chair with Jack Pierce?
Well, it took 4 hours to put the makeup on every morning, and almost that long to take it off every evening. So that's almost a full working day right there.
Wow.
And they did that every morning and every evening for the whole time it took to make the film. Of course, the makeup for The Mummy took almost as long and was equally uncomfortable. And my dad lost 25 pounds during the making of Frankenstein. That makeup was so hot, and they made all the outside films in the August heat in Los Angeles, and he lost 25 pounds during the making of that. Also, when they made The Mummy, and when he was playing the role of Imhotep and was wrapped in all the bandages, he passed out at the end of the day of the shooting of those scenes because the gauze that they used for the bandages absorbed all his body fluids, and he just passed out from dehydration.
Oh, my goodness. And how was the costume? Did that have any weight to it?
Frankenstein?
Yeah.
It weighed 40 pounds.
Oh, my goodness.
And then the plaster boots that he wore were heavy also.
Wow. Imagine that doing that.
And it was a wool suit.
Oof. Wow.
And he had to climb the back hill, the hill in the back of the back lot at Universal time and time again, carrying Colin Clive. There were no doubles at that time. So all those are the actors themselves.
The 1941's The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr. We talk about Jack Pierce a lot. He didn't get along with Lon Chaney Jr. He didn't like wearing makeup.
Well, he was in the wrong role then.
I think he was because it shows you how much patience your dad had. I mean, to do that for...
It was said that my father had the patience of a horse.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Obviously, when the film came out, the film was a commercial and a critical success for Universal, and your dad quickly became a hot property in Hollywood.
Well, nobody expected the film to be the success that it was, of course. I mean, nobody knew it was a frontier-breaking film, and nobody expected my father to be the monster, to be the star of the film. They all expected Colin Clive, Dr. Frankenstein, to be the star of the film. So there were a lot of surprises in that film. And as I say, my father wasn't even invited to the premiere.
Strange, very strange. Your dad also worked with the great Jack Benny.
Oh yes, yes.
He
was on his show.
Yeah, he did Red Skelton, the Donald O'Connor show as well. Did a lot of great the Milton Berle show. Did he like doing comedy?
Oh, he loved doing comedy. My father had a wonderful sense of humor and a wonderful sense of timing.
Because he also did The Strange Life of Walter Mitty with Danny Kaye as well.
Yes,
I mean, that must have been something for him.
He did a lot of comedy.
Yeah. I mean, he did Peter Pan on stage, I believe it was Broadway, am I wrong?
Yes, he did, on Broadway with Jean Arthur.
How was that? Because from what I've researched and read, your dad, I want to circle back to Frankenstein real quick. The monster character real quick, because it was an evil character, scary and edgy, but the children adored him.
That's right. My father always said kids got it. Kids understood that he was the victim and not the perpetrator.
And when he did, like I said, when he did Peter Pan, he used to peek through the hole in the curtain and see all the children trying to fly like Dr. Hook.
Oh, I know, like Captain Hook.
Captain Hook, sorry.
Yeah. When I visited my dad when he was doing Peter Pan back east, I got to fly from the mantle across the stage, and I got fairy dust sprinkled on me. It was wonderful.
Oh, wow, that must have been a thrill as a kid. Jean Arthur was also in that play, and your dad, from what I researched, he used to tell her, listen, have the kids come in your dressing room and have some fun with them, and she wasn't into that stuff.
She was rather retiring. She was rather, she had a bit of claustrophobia.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that. But that was another joy for your dad playing that role of Captain Hook.
Oh, yeah. He'd love to have the kids come backstage afterwards and try on his hook.
And another thing that your dad excelled at was he was a good singer.
Well, he sang in many roles, and Captain Hook was one of them, yes.
He also sang, this is a shocker to me, he also sang, he actually sang with Rosemary Clooney as well.
Yes, he did.
What was that? Where was that? When was that? Do you know?
That was when he guested on her show.
Oh, wow.
Television show.
I want to get into It's Your Life, if I can, with Ralph Edwards.
Okay.
And
yes,
I believe it was 19.
He was absolutely horrified.
Yes, I think you know where I'm going with this. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because it happens a lot. Ralph Edwards was a family friend, was he not?
Yes, he and his wife Jane were very good friends of my father and stepmother's. Yes.
And was there a story that he approached? Did he tell your stepmother that I approached Boris and he said he's okay with it coming on the show? Do you remember that?
No, Ralph knew my father did not want to. Well, my father had elicited a promise from Ralph never to make him a subject of the show.
That's it. So how did that? Do you remember that night? Because you appeared on the show because you came on at the end of the show.
Yes, I did.
But how did that show? How did it come to fruition?
Well, I really don't know. My stepmother and Ralph worked together on surprising him, and they certainly did. They horrified him. He later said my stepmother sold him out for a washer and dryer.
Yeah, because the look upon his face when he's in the back of the audience.
subject of the show that night because he had gotten Ralph to promise he'd never do that to him.
Yeah, because like I said, that look on his face was it was classic. It was classic. When I believe he looked over at your stepmom, and then he got up. Again, Sarah, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Did your dad, after the party, after It's Your Life, did he go to the hospital after?
Yes, he did. That's the night he was first diagnosed with emphysema.
And he smoked a pipe after that because.
Yes, he'd smoked a pipe before that too, but I think he'd quit smoking cigarettes before that, but he smoked a pipe before and after that, but very, very little pipe smoking after that.
Your dad's led an amazing life. He's done so much stuff, so many roles, so much stuff for children. One of his favorite actors was George Kennedy. Did he ever get a chance to meet him?
Yes, I did, and he was doing the same show I was doing back east, and I had an opportunity to tell him that he was one of my father's favorite actors, and he was so touched that he actually cried.
Oh, my goodness.
Because he never had a chance to meet my father. He said he had an opportunity to one time. He'd seen a play my father was in, but he didn't want to wait at the stage door. And he said, so he was walking across the street, and he wanted to cross the street and introduce himself, but he was too shy to do so. He said it was the only opportunity he ever had to meet my father, and he said, I will regret that to my dying day. And I said, oh, my goodness, you should have, because you were my father's favorite actor.
Wow.
And he cried.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness.
And I'm so glad that I told him that story.
Right, yeah. George Kennedy, one of the greats, one of my all-time favorites as well. Great character actor. Great character
Did he
actor.
die?
He died probably like 5 to 7 years ago, I want to guess. Maybe 5.
Yeah.
Around 5 years ago.
But I'm so glad I had a chance to tell him that story.
Yeah, it's a great story. Ironically enough, Sarah, your dad played the monster in Frankenstein, and I've done a lot of horror movies as well, horror shows. You're not a horror fan, are you?
No, I don't like scary movies.
Wow.
Terrible casting, me as my father's daughter.
Oh my goodness. That is.
I leave the room during Murder, She Wrote. I mean, I'm the biggest wuss in the world.
Angela Lansbury too scary for you?
Well, when the music rises, I'm out of the room.
Yeah. Out of all the films that your dad did, it was well over 150. What was your personal favorite?
I love Targets.
Oh, yes, Peter Bogdanovich.
Yes, my father really admired Peter, his creativity, his energy, his talent. Peter wrote that film. He cobbled it together with 10 minutes of Karloff time left from another director. And he really admired Peter's talent, and he enjoyed making that film with him. And by the time the film was over, they'd used more than 10 minutes of Karloff time, and my father donated the balance to the film because he thought it was a really fine film, and it showed what my father really believed, and that is that the horror is on the street, not up on the screen.
Right. Your dad was one of the original founders of the Screen Actors Guild, and a lot of what he did with the makeup and working 19, 20 hours a day, he formed a group, and he would talk a little bit about that.
Oh, that's something he was so quietly proud of, and pleased that he had an opportunity to work with after his own early experiences in the business, to be part of the formation of the Screen Actors Guild, and the purpose of which initially was to give up-and-coming actors a voice in the business and to speak out when conditions were not what they should be for working actors. And when they formed the Guild, of course, it was really those 12 founding members, and my dad's card number was 9. Those founding members were putting their careers on the line because they were essentially forming a union against the studios and against the directors, and so that the working conditions for actors would be improved, and there would be some conditions and rules set for the number of hours and the conditions under which, and a certain number of breaks during the day. And that's what the formation of SAG was based on. And of course, they ran the risk of never working again.
Right.
And I can remember my mother telling me that the couples would go to parties and dance by one another on the dance floor and quietly whisper, "Meeting Tuesday night at so-and-so's house," and dance on by. It was really hush-hush.
Really secret stuff.
Yeah, because it was really really dangerous to be connected with the formation of SAG. And I know my father felt it was very, very important, and he was very proud to be able to be involved with it. And but he was very quiet about it all his life. He never talked about his work with it, but throughout the balance of his career, he worked very hard with SAG.
Yeah, it's an incredible story.
And he also worked very hard against any prejudice in casting and any prejudice against women. And he was a very, very, very much ahead of his time.
Sarah, I had Bela Lugosi Jr. on, and I asked him if his dad ever brought him on some of the sets. Did your dad ever bring you on any sets?
I visited several sets, yes. It was great fun. And my kids visited some.
Oh, wow, interesting. Oh, that's nice. That's kind of nice. When you were a young child, what was the reaction when people found out, maybe in school or high school, or that your dad was the monster in Frankenstein?
He'd gone on to other types of roles and was well known for his work on television, and so it was a pleasant surprise to people to know that my father was Boris Karloff.
I heard your dad in an interview saying that somebody asked him what one of the biggest regrets of his career was. Do you remember what his answer was?
Never being on the stage in England.
Right. Wow. Ironic. It's ironic. He's pretty much been on everywhere, every Broadway, everywhere, and he wasn't in London.
Yeah, that's what he regretted.
Interesting that your parents, your stepmother and your dad, did they live at the Chateau Marmont for a little while?
Yes. After they left California as their primary residence and moved back to New York in 49, and then when they moved back to England in 59, whenever they would come back to California for work, they'd stay at the Chateau Marmont.
Because I had a guest on who wrote a book about the Chateau Marmont, and that was a crazy place back then. That was a real crazy place.
Well, they had lots of well-known residents, yeah. But it was pretty sedate in the 50s.
There was a lot of very famous people that stayed there, and Tony Randall,
yes.
And James Dean, and Nicholas Ray. A lot of
Tony Perkins.
Tony Perkins, right? I think Tab Hunter. Could be wrong. Your dad, another one of his joys, he did a radio show in New York for a year for the children's radio.
Yes, for the Reader's Digest.
Right. How was that? That must have been a joy for him.
Oh, yes, indeed. Anything he did with children, he loved. That's why he had such a good time doing Peter Pan. And he did 20 children's albums for Caedmon Recordings, all the fairy tales, Rudyard Kipling, Hans Christian Andersen, all the well-known fairy tales.
Sarah, I believe there was a time in your dad's career when he thought horror films weren't really popular anymore, and your dad credited Val Newton as the guy that saved him and resurrected his career somewhat. They did 3 movies together.
Yes, and he was very fond of Val Newton, enjoyed working with him. They were both very well-educated, well-read, articulate men, and they enjoyed one another's company. And, of course, the films my dad made with Val Newton were very well written, very well shot, done in black and white. They were excellent films.
Yeah, Bedlam, Island of the Dead, and The Body Snatchers.
Yes.
Great films.
Great films, and gave my father an opportunity to really do some outstanding performances.
One more question for you, Sarah. And I thank you so much for doing this because this is a joy for me, and I'm a big horror fan. Unlike yourself, I'm a big horror fan. Your dad had a good eye for talent. He actually thought that Jack Nicholson was going to be a big star someday because he worked with him on it. I believe it was The Raven.
He worked with him first on The Terror.
Okay, The Terror.
And then on The Raven.
Okay.
Yes.
And he said this kid's going to be big someday.
Yeah, he did. He came home and said, there's a young man working on this film, and he's going to really be something someday. He really has some talent.
Funny. Yeah, he was right on the money with that. And Jack Nicholson, if you look up his career, I actually saw him on an episode of The Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was on an episode of The Andy Griffith Show when he started out.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that Jack doesn't do any interviews because there's a documentary being done on my father, and I'd love it if he would do an interview, but he doesn't do any interviews.
If I can, from what I'm reading and from what I'm hearing about him, I believe he may have dementia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if I'm hearing from some sources, they say that he's not doing. I mean, he's doing good, but he forgets a lot of stuff, and yeah.
Oh, that's too bad because I don't think he's done any interviews in 30 years.
I don't even think he's done any movies, and I can't remember the last film he did.
No, but that's too bad.
When can we see the documentary?
It's not finished yet.
Is Kaloff.com still going?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's my website.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll put that all over social media as well. And Sarah, what can I say? On behalf of the many fans of horror, I want to thank you for coming on my show because this has been an absolute joy for me. And please give
well, thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I've enjoyed every second of it. Thank you.
Please give my best to Baylor Jr. and I believe Lynn as well. And super nice people.
I certainly shall.
Yeah,
they're lovely people. Lovely family.
They're great. I got a call about 2 or 3 months ago out of the Clear Blue from Bela Lugosi Jr. I was driving. I had to pull over. I said, oh, my God, Bela Lugosi Jr. is calling me. I forget what he wanted. I actually asked him some information about the Three Stooges, and he was nice enough, like you say, nice enough to get back to me. I mean, I talked to him prior to that, like a month before that. I asked him a question about that, and he got back to me. So nice.
Oh, yeah, they're lovely
people.
family.
And his daughter, she's a doll.
They really are.
Please give them my best. Please give them my best.
I certainly shall.
Sarah, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. God bless you, and we will wait for your documentary soon. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. And tell me, I'm not doing it. It's being done by a man by the name of Thomas Hamilton. He's from England. So it's sort of full circle, and I know it'll be excellent.
Are you in it? Are you in it? Because there's a lot of people.
Yeah, I've been interviewed for it.
Yeah, there's a ton. If you go look that up on IMDb, guys, tons of interviews on that. All superstars on that in that documentary, and we'll be looking for it.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I know they've done a marvelous job so far, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, Sarah. Thank you so much for doing this from the bottom of my heart. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.